My least favorite question is the one who's going to finish the books when I die. I'm not planning on dying. I'm hoping to live forever, so...
Hi, my name is Anna, and I wonder, is there any fan reactions that you have been surprised by? Like, is there a character that's more popular than you thought, or have people been shocked by something you didn't think we would be shocked at?
I'm reasonably certain what people will be shocked by. You know, I knew that the Red Wedding would provoke a big reaction, and it did. I was pretty confident that, you know, throwing Bran out the window and then killing Ned in the first book would get reactions, and indeed they did. All of those worked exactly the way it did. To the extent that things have surprised me, they tend to be smaller things. I guess maybe I should not have, I don't know, how do I phrase this without getting myself in terrible trouble? I guess I don't understand women, but I was definitely, you know, way back when, surprised by the number of women who reacted positively to characters like Theon and the Hound as dashing romantic figures. The San kind of thing took me by surprise, I must admit, and even more so the women who, and there are some who really like Theon. So that surprised me. Sometimes I get reactions to extremely minor characters, which you know, surprise me. You know, I've had letters from people who tell me that Lord Blackwood is their favorite character. He's had like 3 lines, you know? I think that's what is known in the trade as the Boba Fett syndrome. You know, a character who hardly appears but has something vaguely cool about him. People make him cool, and of course Lord Blackwood has a cloak made of raven feathers. That's his single distinguishing characteristic, but some people think that's cool enough that he becomes their favorite character. So little things like that do tend to surprise me much more than the big things.
Actually, there I wanted to follow up with a question because it's kind of intrigued us. I mean, obviously there were a lot of things that sort of took off in your mind. Was there anything in particular that you found yourself surprisingly fascinated with as you were writing and realized that you had a lot more to say than you thought?
You know, when my storytelling, you know, gene kicks in, then I do get carried away here, and it's a lot of fun. You know, I don't know if it's been published here in Sweden, but a couple years before The World of Ice and Fire, there was the map book, The Lands of Ice and Fire. Have any of you seen that? Has that been published here? It's not actually a book. It's a book-like object that's a box, and inside there are these poster-sized maps. You know, this is how the novels get delayed with stuff like this. Let me tell you. So my publisher comes to me, and they say, "We want to do a book just of the maps. We want to make posters of the maps. And, you know, we'll pay you a lot of money, and you won't have to do any work because we'll just take the maps and we'll blow them up to poster size and issue them. We'll do them in color, and they'll be real nice, and we'll get professional map makers." And I said, "Oh, that sounds good. You know, yeah, send me a lot of money, and you do that, and I'll just keep writing my books." And then they say, you know, I signed a contract, and I get a lot of money, and months pass, and then I get a call and saying, "You know, we took the maps that were in the books, and we blew them up to poster size. There's an awful lot of blank space on them. And they don't look very good. Could you, like, fill in some more rivers and mountains and towns and stuff like that?" So, okay, so I'm making up mountains, I'm making up towns. It's harder than you think, you know? You gotta kind of make sense of the geography, and the rivers have to flow in the right direction, and you gotta name everything, which is pretty damn tough, you know, because all the good names have been used in fantasy here, unless you make up names that are just like nonsense syllables, which you can do, of course. A lot of fantasy writers do. They have just horrible names that obviously have been generated on the internet by a fantasy name generator. I've tried to use those, and they're great if you want everybody named Grizdazzle. But otherwise, you find yourself, okay, mountains here. There'll be, let's see, the Misty Mountains. No, oh, wait a minute, Tolkien used the Misty Mountains. There'll be the Rocky Mountains. Oh, no, there really are Rocky Mountains. The Pointy Mountains. That's stupid, no. And you wind up going until you finally come up with a good name for the mountains. And filling in north and south, well, my maps of those were pretty detailed already, but I did have to make them even more detailed because now they're blown up to poster size. But then I have to fill in Essos. And Essos, there was a lot less. And, you know, my map of the Dothrak I see, there was an 8.5, 11 piece of paper on which I had Vise Dothrak, and the rest said Dothrak I see. So I had like a blank, well, I gotta invent a lot of stuff for that here. So I'm filling that in. And on the edge of the map, on the edge of all the maps that I had drawn up to that point, was the city of Karth, where Dany reaches and has adventures, and then she turns around. She's been going in one direction, now she turns around and goes back the other way, making her way back toward Westeros. But there's a scene in one of the books where Zaro's own Doxos comes to Dany, and he presents her with a huge tapestry of the world, in which the city Karth is at the center. This, of course, implies that there's as much to the east of Karth as there is to the west of Karth. So now my publisher's saying, what about what's to the east of Karth? You know, people have read about this tapestry. They want to see the rest of the world here. And so now I'm drawing what's on the other side of Karth, which led to an interesting discrepancy because I had some very early primitive maps about what's on the other side of Karth. And I gave those maps to HBO at a certain point, and HBO started issuing maps which used those maps. But when I was doing the map book, I looked at those maps and said, this doesn't work. I don't like this. I don't like the way it's out. And I completely threw those out, and I redesigned everything east of Karth into something that I like a lot better. So the Game of Thrones world is significantly different from the Ice and Fire world, and it's even if it's basic geography because of that change. But then, you know, I had blank pages east of Karth, so I filled it in, and with rivers and mountains and valleys and dead cities and live cities, and, you know, making as much east of Karth as was west of Karth, so we could have maps of it. And I ran out of names, you know. At the end here, I was making tributes. I put in Carcosa, which I figured nobody would get because it's a really obscure reference. I didn't know True Detective was going to pick up the fucking thing a couple years later. And I put up Kadath by the Great Wayside. These are Lovecraftian references and all that. Little tip of the hat to H.P. Lovecraft. So I put all that in. You know, the story was never going to go there. I figured, it's just a map. I'll put in a little obscure thing. Some of the real hardcore fans will get a kick out of it. Yep. And that's fine. So the map book comes out, and I've done all this time inventing cities and mountains and filling in maps. And I think I'm never going to have to worry about it. Well, here comes the world of Ice and Fire. And here comes the notes. Well, what about Yeti? We need an article about Yeti. What are you going to say about the Jogos Nye? You better tell us something about that. So now I'm writing entire articles on the history of these places that I kind of had to invent in order to have something on the map because I said the tapestry I had Karth in the middle. But you know, once I got into it, it was fun. You know, I'm inventing. You know, I mean, I could probably go off and write stories set in Yiti with all of the various colored emperors, and I'm inventing and, great emperors and weird emperors and stuff like that, and the history of Lang and all of that. So that was cool. That's another thing I stole from Lovecraft. When you steal from one previous writer, that's plagiarism, but when you steal from many of them, it's research. So keep that in mind. I like mystery. I like unexplained things. To me, it makes the world richer. It makes it cooler if there's stuff in the world. I mean, Lovecraft, who I made these notes to, created this cosmology that he never explained. There were common references to stories, and he hinted at unspeakable mysteries and histories and, vast aeons of lost civilizations and alien races and dark gods living among us. But it was all very disturbing and very mysterious and very evocative. After he died, August Derleth, who was another writer and a huge Lovecraft fan, completed many of his incompleted stories and really regularized this. Derleth was not nearly the writer Lovecraft was, but he was a very methodical man. So he went through and he came up with, here's how you put all this together, and here's the entire history of all of the denizens in the Lovecraft world, and here they all related to each other. And to my mind, he completely missed the point. That never should have been done here. We didn't need the history of the great old ones and how they related to the ancient ones, and where the Yuggoth came into it and all of that. They were much better when they were just evocative and mysterious and disturbing than when he put them all in a theology.
I find the mystery is obviously something that many people are very interested in, and obviously in the novels you have mysteries of the past, mysteries about far places. You also have mysteries very present about current things. I mean, the first book is, who killed John Arryn, and, who really tried to kill Bran. Does mystery fiction, is that something, one of the genres you're really interested in, or is it just the idea of mystery in general that leads you to put that kind of...
Well, I do like mystery fiction. The present day mysteries in Ice and Fire will be resolved mostly. But I also like the ancient histories of, what lies beyond the dark curtain and where the gods came from. No, I'm not going to bring any gods on stage. I'm not going to give you a complete history of Sithorios, and, the mysteries of Yin will have to remain mysterious and for people to, to wonder about themselves. I think they're left better that way, a little more mysterious and cool. I do also believe in a certain amount of ambiguity and subtlety. Going through this museum, you look at the display on King Carl XII, who was shot in the head, and no one knows whether he was shot in the head by the enemy or his own men. We don't know that. It's ambiguous. It's right there in display. Maybe he was killed by the Swedes, and maybe by the Norwegians he was fighting. Who killed them? We'll never know. So if that's true in life, why shouldn't it be true in fiction? What happened to the two princes in the tower? People are arguing about that, 500 years later. Who killed them? Were they killed? Were they smuggled out and saved? Who knows? Why shouldn't we have similar mysteries in fiction that we can argue about and wonder about, since they exist in real life?
I was just curious to follow up then, as an author, when you introduce a mystery that you want to leave ambiguous, do you have the answer yourself all the time, or do you leave it ambiguous to yourself as well?
In the vast majority of cases, I know the answer to, things like who killed John Arryn and all of that. Sometimes the answer, when I unfold it in the book, I try to do it fairly subtly. I don't tend to write the classic detective scene where, everybody gets together in one room and he says, and here are the clues, and I have put them together because I am Ellery Queen or Sherlock Holmes or whatever, or Poirot, and here is what my little gray cells have told me. But the answer is there if the reader is paying attention, and you can put it together yourself.
Yes, the movie is always scarier before you see the monster, basically.
That is true.
You can be as vague as you want about this question, but which character would you say is the most misunderstood?
Misunderstood. Boy, I don't know. That's a tough one. I understand them all pretty well. I don't know.
My experience, the character that's been most misunderstood is generally Catelyn Stark and her relationship with Jon and what it means about her behavior and what kind of person she is. That's one that a lot of people take issue with. She's a character that gets argued about a lot.
The show now has, God, it must be a dozen characters, maybe as many as 20, who are dead on the show but alive in the books. At first it was just one or two, Mago, Eerie, Cheekwee, but it's expanded season by season. Pip, Gren, now, well, you saw all the people who died in the last season, and this will accelerate even next season. So obviously, I got a lot of characters running around in the books who are still alive and kicking, and they're dead. And there's also characters like one of the chapters I didn't read, that I read in Frankfurt, or Hamburg rather, the Arion chapter is entirely composed of characters who don't even exist in the show. So, of course, there's going to be huge differences. So you may see some extremely shocking things in the show that come up in the next season or two. But I'm not sure you could consider them spoilers, because they're never going to happen in the books. They can't happen in the books because the show and the books have gone down different roads. I mean, I knew Frank Herbert a little. No, he wasn't a close friend or anything, but I met him a little in the last few years of his life. And Frank had actually kind of come to hate Dune by the end, because that was all anybody wanted from him. And he really wanted to write. He had other novels he wanted to write, other worlds and characters he wanted to create. And his publishers and his fans were just saying, oh, we don't care about that, just give us another Dune novel. Okay, thanks for that one. Give us another Dune novel. Okay, that was good. Give us another Dune novel. And I hope I never wind up in that situation. Fortunately, I don't have to, because I'm doing well enough so that when I finish Ice and Fire, I can write pretty much anything I want, and if it only sells 3,000 copies, I won't give a crap. But I hope it won't. And actually, I don't think, even when I finish Ice and Fire, this story will be finished, but I don't think I'll ever be finished with the world.